wanted to make a video on how to layer different effectors and animators and looping keyframes using the new Unreal Engine 5.4 tools, as well as some existing stuff in Sequencer. This is sort of an homage to those OG Cinema 4D tutorials that I used to watch back in the day. Hopefully this is going to be a fun one, and let's just get started. Okay, so I'm in a blank level in Unreal Engine 5.4, just the latest version as of today. First thing we want to do is make sure we have the correct plugins enabled. Should only be 2 that you need, and they're probably already on by default, but that is obviously the motion design tool or mode, and then also the modeling tools editor mode. So we just need those 2, and then we are good to go. So there's pretty much only 2 components to this animation. It's the bouncing ball, which is the sphere, and then a cube, like a flat tile kind of cube thing. And actually first, let's get our background in. So I'm just going to go to this icon up here, go to lights, and then HDRI backdrop, and drag that in. And then I'm just going to go to my HDRI folder. I use this in all of my tutorials, but just like a blank white background. I've linked it in previous tutorials before. I'll probably find a better way to link it, like for free on Gumroad or something, for the description below. Cool, so once you have this in your scene, I'm just going to zero out the coordinates and then just drop it down to like a -5,000, just so we don't get any shadows casting on the ground and that we have a smooth white or gray background. And then I'm just going to turn the brightness up to a 2 or 3 maybe. And I realized we have auto exposure and everything on. So let's also quickly get our post-process volume. So just go down to volumes, post-process, zero out that, press G. Okay, cool. And I'm just going to go down to exposure, turn my min and max 0 and 0. And then I've got a bunch of settings favorited here, and in my 3D art or product viz template video, I go over a bunch of this stuff, so please feel free to check it out. Make my exposure compensation 0, bloom, and lens flares 0. So that's pretty much the basic settings I need for this at the moment. Now the next thing we will do is model the sphere and cube. So super simple. Let's go. Let me first save all in case any crashes happen. Let's go up here and then go to shapes, sphere, zero out the coordinates, and then we will make this, first press the lock button so it stays uniform, and I'll make this 0.15, so just a small ball. Oh, and we need to make the post-process volume unbound. There we go. So now we're actually applying it to the scene, and I can probably reduce the brightness to 2 maybe for the background. Also, you can use whatever background you want. You don't have to follow exactly as I do. The next thing we want to do is go to this top left menu for the different modes and go to modeling mode. And now we'll just quickly make our little tile box thing. So just go to box, place it anywhere in the scene. I'm going to press Alt-3 to go to unlit mode, just so I can see the different quads on it. And I will make the width, I want to say 10? Yep. The depth 10, and then the height 2. So that'll just make this little cube box here. And then I'm just going to zero out the coordinates. And let me move. I'll hit accept. Let me move my sphere out the way. And then what I'll do is I'll just zoom in a bit, select the cube, go to model. Nope. Go to, oh no, it is model. So go to model, polygroup edit. And then I'm just going to select all my edges by dragging over them. I'm just going to go to wireframe view. That's Alt-2, by the way, Alt-2. And then Alt-4 is back to lit mode. So I'm just cycling through these guys up the top. So select all my edges, go to edge edits, bevel, and then turn the bevel distance down to like a 0.1, maybe. Let's see. Maybe a 0.05. Yeah, that's a bit better. And then subdivisions up to like 3 or 4 should be fine. And then accept, accept. And I just hit Shift 1 to go back to selection mode, by the way. So definitely take note of all the shortcuts that are next to the buttons. And that's all we need for geometry. All right, so now let's get our ball to be bouncing infinitely. So super simple. I'm gonna go back to lit mode, gonna save all real quick, and I'm also just gonna drag a spotlight into the scene. And I'm also just gonna quickly give these guys some materials. They're just basic orange materials, so nothing crazy. And let me zero out the ball as well, and I'll move my box out the way. Okay, so instead of creating a sequencer like how I would normally do, you know, right click sequencer, I'm actually gonna go into the motion design mode, give that a start, and do it all in here, because we will also be using, let me just drag this here, we will be using, you know, like the effectors and cloner, and we might want to keyframe some values in that. So I'm just going to make sure it's all in the motion design sequencer, and then at the end we can export this out to be like a regular sequence in the level. So let me just select my sphere here and press F, which will zoom into it. And I'm also going to go just back to my default viewport, because I don't really like the motion design viewport very much at the moment for 3D stuff. So we're just going to drag the sphere onto here. And before we set any keyframes, I'm actually going to move the sphere up maybe to a value of 100. And let me move my spotlight up as well. And also maybe 100 is a bit too much. I'll make it 50, 75. Yeah, 75. And now what we'll do is set a keyframe here, and then we'll move it 15 frames. And this reminds me, the motion design template comes at 60 FPS almost by default. I'm going to change it to 30. So we're going to go to frame 15, which will be half a second, and then set the sphere back to 0, and then set another keyframe in the location. We're not really changing the scale and rotation, so I'm actually just going to delete those keyframes for now. So really we just care about the location, and it should just be doing that. Now, how do we get this to loop infinitely? So first thing I'm going to do is actually extend my in and out points of this sequence. So like go out to 900, press the right square bracket. So that'll be 30 seconds. And let me expand this a bit. Now what we can do now is actually select these two, and you can actually use the new keyframe presets for like the easing in and out. So this usually works only on transform keyframes, not like other values. So as long as it's a transform keyframe, you know, location, rotation, scale, it should work. So select both of them. Oh yeah, you can select the start, but not a final keyframe. I'll just select the start, I guess. No, you know what? Let's select both just in case. Go to preset. And if we think about the speed or the way a ball bounces, it kind of starts slow and then accelerates to the bottom and then like bounces back up in the inverse manner. So slow, fast, fast, slow. If you look at a whole bounce going from top to bottom, back to the top. So we kind of want, it'll probably be the opposite of a cubic. Oh no, yeah, an ease in cubic. So slow and then going up to fast. So I'll select cubic, and then let me just set my out point to frame 30, just so it loops quicker. Yeah, so you can see it starts slow, so it was the correct one to choose. It starts slow and then accelerates as we go down. And to fine tune this, what I like to do is actually select my track and go to this button here, which is the curve editor. And you can see here, if I go to location, and really we're just animating the Z. So we can just look at the Z. You can see it starts slow and then speeds up. To get this to loop without, you know, having to select both and then duplicate it the whole way, what you can do is actually select the end keyframe and then go to this guy here. So choose how the curve is evaluated if sampled after the last key. So pretty much, what do we do after the last key? Do we do nothing? Do we make it keep going down? What we want to do is actually oscillate it, so ping pong. You could also do a cycle, but because we've only done half of the animation, we now want it to almost reverse it back. So that's kind of what a ping pong does, or an oscillate. So if I select this, you'll see now it bounces back up, and if I zoom out, it keeps doing it forever. So we'll hit save, and if I now make this guy back out to 900, right square bracket, let me hit play. So you can see we've got a bouncing ball, but it kind of hovers in the top point for a little too long, and that's because of the way the preset we used. If we go back to the curves and go to Z, you'll see it actually, the value of this handle flattens out completely at the top for a little too long. So what we can do is actually grab this handle by clicking it And I think if you hold shift, you can now drag that in and just make that flatness of the curve shorter rather than longer, because the longer it's flatter, the more it'll like hover in the air for a little bit. So I reckon I'll make it like quite a bit shorter. Just be careful. And you'll notice here, if I move it, you can see in real time. So if we make it super flat like this, and I'll hit play, while it's in this flat point, it's just gonna stand still. So if I select that again, I'll make it way shorter. That's definitely a lot better, a bit smoother. It pauses maybe for a second at the top, but I think I'm okay with it. I might want it a little smoother. So drag it out a tiny bit. Yeah, that's better. So now we've got an infinite ball, an infinite bouncing ball, sorry. So now the next thing we need is to actually move the ball along a distance so it's not just bouncing in the same spot. And the best way I found to do that, I tried playing with like these animators and stuff, and they're a bit finicky. Like if you use the new motion design animators and you also want to add keyframes to those things, it doesn't actually work in combination. So you kind of need to do a little mix and match. But anyway, the best thing I found, if we go to this motion design outliner, they have this little shortcut button to create a null actor. So I'm just gonna click that and I'll make a null actor, and I will call it ball underscore parent, and I'll call our sphere ball. So now I'm just gonna drag our ball under the null or on top of the null, and we're gonna animate this null to move along a distance using the exact same method we just did. So to do that, we just drag our parent or our null into the sequence, and now we kind of just need to play around with like what distance makes sense. So you'll know what I mean in a sec, and I just need to zero out my null's coordinates. Yeah, make sure your null is at the origin, otherwise it'll affect your ball because it's like adding to that location. So make sure your null is at 0, 0, 0. Now let's add a transform track to our null, and you'll see why I'm doing it to the null later on instead of animating the actual ball moving along the y-axis or the green axis here. So let's add a transform track. We'll add a location keyframe, and then how far did I move it? I think I moved it 30 units, and it'll be along the y. Yeah, so we'll start at 0 and then we will move to frame, would it be 15? Let's check. In 30 I'll add 30 to the y, and I can just delete the z and x coordinates, and I'm going to select both of these and press 4 to make them linear. And if you right click, you can also do that by right clicking, but the shortcut is 4. So okay, yeah, I think that works. We'll see. We just need to loop it now. So if I go to this last keyframe, and then I'll go to my curve editor, we'll grab the Y value, which is the green, the last keyframe. We'll do the exact same thing, but instead of oscillate, we will just make it continue forever at that value. So it'll just keep going up forever, as you can see. And that should work. So now if I hit save, we'll go back. Yeah, now we've got a bouncing ball that moves at the exact same speed and distance forever, as long as we set our out point to 900. I don't know why I'm over explaining things, bro. Now, a useful thing of using this as a parent, you can now kind of adjust the speed of how far it bounces. So maybe I want this to be, instead of 30, I make it 60. Now it'll bounce a lot quicker. So you can see it's a faster moving ball. So you can sort of adjust how fast you want the ball to move depending on the animation you're after. And a good thing about having this null actor is I can also put this spotlight on top of it, or make it a child, and now we can have our light follow the ball. Okay, so now we've got a ball bouncing infinitely along a distance. The next thing we can do is set up the grid, the cloner of cubes along the bottom, and start adding some effectors to it. Okay, so for this cloner setup, I'm just gonna grab my cube, move it back to 0. And I think we actually want, because when we get to the bottom, when we get to frame 15, we actually need the cube to be here, like underneath the sphere. So we need the box. I think it would be, let me just go to my front view, which is Alt, what is that? Alt H. Could just do it like manually, but I want to say it should be 9.5. That looks right. So negative 9.5. Okay, cool. Move it back to 0 in the Y and then negative 9.5 in the Z. I'm going to hit Alt G to go back to perspective mode. Now let's grab a cloner actor, put it in the scene, and before I forget, let's save all because we might crash because of this stupid button. They still haven't fixed it sometimes. I'm not trying to lose everything. Let's go up to the cloner, rename it cloner underscore grid or cubes maybe. And then let's delete the default cube, hit yes. And then let's put in our box, which we can call tile, as a child of the cloner. Let's make sure we zero out our cloner coordinates and then change the layout from grid to, oh no, we can leave it on grid. Let's change the Z count to 1. And what else do we want? Oh, we make sure we zero out the rotation. I was wondering, why is it diagonal? Because our cloner is rotated. Also, make sure we zero out our cubes, location and rotation. Okay, so everything should be good. Even the Z we can zero out. And now we want to actually move our cloner to negative 9.5, which is what we did earlier with just the cube. Cool. And now we just need to change our spacing. So remember, our tile is like a 10 by 10 with 2 in the height. So let's just make the spacing 11 by 11, and we don't really care about the Z because we are not cloning up and down. And then let's just increase the count. We need to increase the Y count. Let's just make it like 500. Cool. And then I'll just move it around there. I'm also going to just quickly increase the size of our HDRI to like 500. There we go. And then I'm just going to go to the skylight and turn off effects world, just so the HDRI is not contributing lighting wise. It's just kind of acting as a background. All right, cool. Now let's just set up a camera. We've got our path working now. So if I just play it, we've now got a ball bouncing along the path. And this shadow is a little too sharp for me. So I'm just going to increase the source radius to like a 5 or a 10, maybe a 5. Let's see how that looks. And that'll just soften up the shadow a little bit. Also, it keeps cutting out because there's like a culling distance on ray trace shadows. So if I just go to my console variable and type r.raytracing.culling, make that 0, you'll see our shadow comes in. Not great for performance if you're working on some real-time thing, but good for this. Okay, that should work. Now what were we doing? Camera. So let's go back to frame 0. I will create a camera, cinematic, cinecamera actor. Let me go to my 2-pane view. And if you don't know how to do that, just go to this top left menu, layouts, 2 panes. Change this to cinematic viewport. I'm just gonna go back to my select mode just so I don't have that menu popping up. But don't disable motion design editor interface. Make sure this stays on. And then from perspective, choose cinecamera actor. Let me move back. Maybe increase my focal length to 50, maybe 75. Yeah. And then I'm also just gonna change my focus setting from manual to tracking. And I will select the ball so it's always in focus. So if our camera, where is this guy, is here, let me just turn on the grid. So I'll just try to make sure it's always maybe around there, like line the ball up with the left third. So using the grid, the rule of thirds here. I think there is pretty good. Yeah, around there is good. So drag our camera, I'm just gonna rename it to cam 1. drag that into the sequencer, and go to transform and set a keyframe in the location. Gonna exit out of this view. Now let's go to frame, let me zoom out while I'm holding control. Frame 900, go to 899. We just want to drag it out, drag our camera out all the way over to roughly the same spot, and then hit plus in the keyframe for the location. I'm going to select both, press 4 to make it linear, and now we should have a camera that tracks our ball. Nice. So we're pretty much almost there. Now we can start doing the fun stuff, which is adding the effectors and things to our cloner. Also, I quickly just added a small rectangular light next to the sphere here, just to fill out the shadows a bit. Now for the effectors, let's first get that scaling from 0 and like the cubes and tiles land in place. Sorry, I keep interchanging between cube and tile. I should stick to tile. So yeah, let's first do that one, which is a linear effector or plane effector in Unreal, but you'll know it as the linear effector in Cinema 4D. So what we can do is select our cloner and then do spawn linked effector. Just do that. And I'm just gonna call it fx underscore plane underscore scale in, like it scales into the scene. Not great naming, but it's all right. Where is our guy? There it is. So you can see this is the effector. By default, it's a sphere. So let's change it to a plane, which is this guy. So we can sort of have it come in as our ball is bouncing. I definitely need to drag it into the ball parent because I need it to move with the ball. And then let's zero out the coordinates so that it's centered to the ball, and then we'll move it 115, and then I'm pretty sure I used the in, out, back easing preset because right now it's linear, so if I hit play it's kind of just doing this, and I kind of want it to be a little further in, a little further out, something like that. Yeah, I like that more. And then we want to find in, out, back. Cool. So I know that looks a little weird, so we probably need to move it out that way a bit. And what we can do is now in the mode of the plane, go to press 0. So now it'll be coming in from 0, sort of like this. Yep. And then what else did I do? I did 50 in the Z of the effector. So it was coming in from 50 in the height instead of 100, which is the default. And now I can probably move it in a little closer. Something like that works, but you can play around with it and also change the different easing presets. So you can see if I do in and out, it's like super buttery smooth. Wow, I actually like that. That's quite nice. And then they have different ones, like different cool ones, like out bounce. So it's like following the curvature of like the easing that you see here. Out elastic, super fast. So yeah, definitely play around with it. I'm gonna go back to actually in, out, quint because I just like how smooth it is. Make sure we save. Now the cool part of this is obviously when the ball bounces on the path, we need it to react to the path, or we need the path to react to the ball. So for that, we'll go back to our cloner, add another spawn linked effector, and then we will call it fx ball, and like I'll call it spring because the path is kind of going to spring up and also do stuff. So I'll make that a child of the ball and then zero out the coordinates of that guy. So that's this thing. Let's first change the inner and outer radius. So I think I made it inner 5, and then the outer I made it, what did I make it? 40. So it should look something like this. I want to say I feel like I could make, yeah, I'll make the inner radius 10 for now, maybe like an 8. Yeah, just so it kind of covers the ball. And then let's just see what it looks like. Okay, so currently not the best looking effect, but what we want to do is set the Z to a -10. So it looks like the path is kind of getting pushed down by the ball. So it would look like this. And then we want to change the easing instead of linear to in and back. So it kind of springs down and back up. So you'll see what I mean. See, it looks like kind of like a tight spring. And we can probably make this a little bigger, -15. Cool. And then I'll make the outer radius maybe 50. Maybe 45 actually. Yeah, so that's pretty good. So if I just look at that from the beginning. So now we're sort of interacting with the path and you can kind of see where this is going. You just have this ball, this effector that's a child of the ball. And as long as it's affecting the cloner, you can kind of fake how it interacts. And this is kind of a workflow that I love using in terms of layering different effectors together, having a null, using the different children and parents, weird terminology by the way, to layer in different animations. Sorry, I keep waffling too much. And now the next thing we want to do is go down to the orientation and vortex force. So let's just turn them on by default and you'll see what happens. Pretty cool actually, by default. So it sort of slides it like enables force onto the cloners, which means it's sort of free to do whatever it wants and you can really play with the cool effects that you want to use on this. The annoying thing is it doesn't reset automatically. Like you can see the cubes are probably still floating. Yeah, they're still floating out here. So you got to just go back to your cloner and then do force update and that'll reset everything. I'm just going to change the values of this a bit. Orientation force, I think I set it to 100. So if I turn off vortex for now, what that orientation does, it kind of makes the cubes face towards the ball. So it's almost like the ball is crushing the middle part and like breaking the tile. So that's sort of the effect I wanted. So you can see that's what it's doing. And then I will enable the vortex force and I'll set the amount to 2000 instead of 10,000. And then in the X value, I will set it to -500. And then if I hit play, you'll see it kind of moves up. Quite cool. And then put 0 in the Z. That's a bit weird. I got to update the cloner. Go back to cloner, force update. There we go. So that's pretty much the basics of this animation. Now you've got a cube, you can play around with the different effects that you want on the spring effector that we made essentially. You can like add some curl noise to it. I don't know why sometimes it makes it go down and sometimes it makes it go up. You can do the attraction force. Not super prevalent here. If I turn off these guys, the gravity force, essentially just enabling gravity physics on them. Anyway, vortex and orientation is the one I used. So feel free to go ahead, do what you want with it. If you do make some cool animations, please tag me on Instagram or wherever you're posting it and show me a cool way you've done it. I'm probably going to add a little more to this for the final render. And feel free to ask me any questions in the comments. Okay, now I'm actually going to end this. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it was enjoyable and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.